You're listening to the Leadership Blend Podcast.
I'm ready.
On the Thinking Out Loud Network. Check out the Thinking Out Loud Network at thinkingoutloudnetwork.com.
All right, everybody, welcome to this week's edition of the Leadership Blend with your host, Ricardo D. Rice. Okay, so look, today is one of those really important shows that I do from time to time. So I have a lot of guests in the studio, and I have a familiar face in the studio. Y'all gonna know this voice. So I'm gonna let her reintroduce herself. Y'all know this voice. She was with me for about almost a year, 7 months.
7 months, yeah.
7 months. So go ahead and tell them who they listening to.
Hey, everybody, it's Just Jazz. I'm back from basic training and AIT. I know you all guys missed me, so I'm here. But I interned with Mr. Ricardo from January to July, like you said, almost a year, and then I had to go off and do training, and so now
that was
I'm
July?
back. Yeah.
You sure?
July 16th, 15th, because I shipped out July 16th.
You were gone that long?
I was gone that long. I've been gone for like half a year.
Jesus.
I know. When I came, I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is the civilian world? I've missed all this. It was so much going on.
Why are you so dramatic? What?
No, it really is like that. When you leave, you're like, oh my gosh, I missed all this.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't.
Because you have like no contact with the outside world besides letters.
Yeah, I felt some kind of way. Which you told me to write you a letter, but I can't write you a letter without
the way it happened. Look, when we got off the bus, they was like,
you
here.
sound like you get ready to say. See what happened was.
No, let me tell you.
That's what I feel like you get ready to say.
So they pick you up from the airport. You're with the drill sergeant and all that, but you don't get your address until you're physically at your unit or company. So before you get to your unit or company, you're at reception, which is like processing. So I'm getting all these shots. They're checking my mouth, make sure I'm clear, like I didn't fail anything, I didn't lie or whatever. But you don't get your address until you get to your company. By then my phone is gone. I have no phone. They took it away as soon as I got to reception. I was like, oh, that sucks. So
I'm only gonna believe you because the ladies are in front of me. I just feel
that's how it happened for me. But I know my friends who went to Relax in Jackson, they had their phones all through reception. I didn't get that luxury, so blame Fort Leonard Wood.
Fine, I'll give you a pass. So Jazz is back today. I don't know if she's hanging out permanently. I don't know what she's doing. I didn't get a chance to ask because she walked in. I threw her in the studio, so I don't really know what she's doing. I don't know why my phone's going off. So yeah, there you have it. Now, for our very special guests in the studio, I'm gonna let them introduce themselves. I'll let them, if they choose to be a them or she, if they choose to be a she or a them, introduce themselves, starting on my left.
All right. So my name is Kamala Zulfagari. I'm Executive Director of Street Grace. I've been in this role for a little over a year, but before that, I was the Attorney General's Chief Human Trafficking Prosecutor, Fulton County's Human Trafficking Prosecutor.
Don't give them all that. Yeah, don't give them all that out the game. We're going to give them that in a few
Street Grace
minutes.
Executive Director focusing on preventing and ending human trafficking. Yes.
And I am Ebony Bell. I'm the Director of Outreach and Operations at Street Grace.
All right, so for those of you that watched the show, you know that last year we did a show with Bob Rogers, and he brought Monet with him, and they had Katie with them as well, who was a survivor and was kind of saved by Street Grace. So my guest today I'm sorry, Bob, I gotta say it, is a beautiful upgrade because she's a beautiful upgrade. Her bio is amazing. That's why I stopped her, because I really, really want to get it. Because when I read it, I was like, Jesus, thank you, Bob, thank you. Like, y'all know how we are about politics. I love politics. I love anything that's legislature. Supposed to go to law school, chose not to. So my undergrad was pre-law. So I love that kind of stuff. It's kind of my world. Should have been. So now you can tell about your background.
Okay. I have to start
and the
with,
amazing things you've done.
Anyone who changes their mind about law school is super smart in my book.
See,
so many great things you can do with your life. So I'm at Street Grace now, focusing on preventing, and really because where I came from was I was the Attorney General's Human Trafficking Prosecutor under Attorney General Sam Olens and then Chris Carr, focusing on prosecuting cases around the state, and also a lot, like you've been talking about, on the legislation, on bringing, and we finally did this past year, bringing Georgia up from a failing grade with our human trafficking laws to an A grade. So we are super excited.
Yes, kudos.
Total historic year last year. It was great to be down there with Street Grace and, of course, all of our legislative partners. And then before that, I was Fulton County's human trafficking prosecutor for several years. They were the first in the state to have a unit dedicated to human trafficking. So I worked for Paul Howard down there, and we had just I mean, that was so many cases, and so much teaching and training. It was just, it's great. It's why I'm a street grace now, because when you have seen so much trauma and so much evil, you realize you've got to put efforts into preventing, because it is not enough to wait till somebody gets exploited and then jump in and save them.
Well, let's start from there, actually. Okay, so what is sex trafficking? What is it?
Right. So sex trafficking is basically commercial sex.
And you can simplify it. Like, you can absolutely simplify
so
it.
it's commercial. If you're dealing with an adult, you have to explain it differently for adults and kids. So if you're dealing with an adult, it's some type of commercial sex, so sex in exchange for something of value that's compelled by force, fraud, or coercion. So it could be something like, there was recently a case down from Fulton Industrial Boulevard, you go have sex with these guys and make money, or else I'm going to shoot you. Jesus. It can be guns. It can be force. It can also be, I've got these naked photos of you, do this, or I'm going to share them with your friends. It can be, I know where your parents live. It can be any type of coercion or deception. Really so down here in Atlanta, the deception's very often, well, I'm going to get you in a music video, or you're going to be in a TV.
So that is a thing. That is a thing.
It is. And it's like, oh, wait, you get down here and it's, wait, no, you didn't understand. You've got to work your way into that. This is how you get into it. And, a deception just means it's a lie. It was a lie that brought them down here. It's a lie that's getting them to work it. But in Georgia, and actually in the country, so for children, and that's anyone under 18, trafficking is a trafficker is anyone involved in their commercial sexual exploitation. So if a child is having sex in exchange for something, whether it's money, a place to stay, food to eat, all of those people involved in taking advantage of them are traffickers. So, and that's the buyer and the seller. Georgia's been fabulous about saying the demand, those who are purchasing our kids and taking advantage of their youth, their vulnerabilities, and buying them for sex are traffickers, just like those that are putting them up in hotels, putting them up online and selling them.
Good grief. Okay, so what gave Atlanta or Georgia an F? Why were we an F?
So back in 2001, trafficking wasn't even a crime. Basically, if there was what is now trafficking, the child victim is the one that got arrested for prostitution.
Seriously?
And yep. And if the adult got arrested at all, it was a misdemeanor $50 fine.
$50. Whew.
Wow.
That's
so.
So I guess the question would become distinguishing prostitution versus sex trafficking.
Right. So if you're dealing with, adults, it's the element of coercion. It's that she is not doing this willingly. She's been deceived. It can be force, can be a gun, but it can also be any type of coercion. It's not her free will. When you're dealing with kids, think about it. Kids can't consent to rent a hotel room. Kids can't consent to rent a car. They also cannot consent to have commercial sex. There's an inherent coercion and exploitation in that. They're being exploited for their youth. So there isn't. Actually, one of the huge wins we finally had in Georgia, and we were the last state touching us to do that, is children under 18 can no longer be charged with prostitution. They are, if somebody is paying you for your body, if you are a trafficking victim, and they are a trafficker, because they're taking advantage of your youth, your vulnerability. We don't let kids commit to things at that age for a reason.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
But what it usually looks like, is a child who has been abused at home, is being abused at home, is for some reason is running from something. Most of our trafficking victims come from an abusive background. So you're taking advantage of not just their youth, but other vulnerabilities. And it used to be they met them after they ran. So it was the girl on the street corner, it was the girl at the mall during school hours, it was the girl at the gas station, the girl waiting for the bus outside of juvenile court. All of these are girls whose faces I know. Who was, hey, let me help you. You're beautiful. I'll be your father, or your daddy, your daddy figure, or your boyfriend figure, figuring out what her needs are. He's like, I'll figure out what her needs are, and I'll exploit that. And it's here. You have a place to stay. Oh, wait, I don't have money for the hotel tomorrow. You have one thing of value that you can sell, and I can help you do that.
Jesus.
It used to almost always be the girl had run from some type of trauma before they met their trafficker. But in the last 5-10 years, it's all moved online. Traffickers don't hang out and look for somebody at the mall or the corner. We don't make relationships in person anymore either. We start them all online, and so do the traffickers. They can hit up 50 people on Instagram. They'll
Literally.
go, this is my vulnerability. I'm looking for somebody whose main picture is say a tank top and they have a child with them, that. And hey, you're beautiful. I'd love, it's crazy. It's out of the blue, but you just never know when there could be a spark. This one guy I just sold my car, and I want to go out and celebrate. He sent a fistful of cash. Who wants to go? I'd love to take you to the mall to celebrate. He was sending these to 50 girls a day. None of them responded and said, hey, I want to go to the mall. Who responded was somebody who was facing a vulnerability. My mom just lost her job. We don't know how we're going to pay our rent. We're trying to get our power turned back on. I just found out I'm pregnant and I know my boyfriend's gonna leave. So if you're casting a wide enough net, it could be the girl now who says, I just got in a huge fight with my mom. She doesn't understand me. You'll catch somebody in a really vulnerable time. And
So is this just primarily females?
Yes, that's my question.
That's
You
a good
always
question.
feel about,
All
care
right.
about that.
And then that's a little bit of a bad habit a lot of us have because trafficking hides. So we learned trafficking was happening. Law enforcement started doing proactive investigations, looking for girls, found girls, all these people arrested for trafficking girls. But then some of the studies started to show that males were trafficked. Maybe as many as 50% of our child victims were males.
Seriously?
Yes. And that number may be a little high. A lot of the numbers have shown more like in the 20s, 30, 40%. But as soon as we started looking for male trafficking victims, again, we started finding them. When boys are trafficked, it tends to be a little different. So most girls are first trafficked, or the majority, around that 14, 15-year-old range, younger if it's a family member trafficking them. Boys tend to be trafficked even younger the first time. And while girls are more likely to be manipulated to meet their very real emotional needs, safety, love, security, boys are more likely to be trafficked to meet just their basic food, shelter, clothing, drugs if they have a drug dependency. And the other thing about boys is when they're trafficked, they're more likely to encounter violence, particularly from their buyers. Bruises, broken bones, cigarette burns.
Why is that? Is because do they have more of an urge to resist versus a female?
A lot of times it's just those who are seeking to purchase the boys. It's just what they're encountering. And, and that's some of the research that I think we still need more. But what we do know is that, yes, a lot more boys encounter violence. And sometimes the boys they're not being as guarded. Protected is totally the wrong word to use for someone who's exploiting. But with that girl, there's somebody, they know somebody's in the next room. And with boys, people don't always know they might have a trafficker in the next room if you hurt them. And girls, it's sadly, in culture, a little more expected to the point of, accepted in some cultures. Well, that's just her pimp. We glorify pimp culture here.
We really do.
We don't
absolutely
recognize
do.
what it is.
We absolutely do.
And so, of course, that girl's got that guy in the other room, so you're a little more careful. And I'm not going to say he's protecting her. He's 100% exploiting her. He's her trafficker. But it might, be one of the reasons boys do have more violence, because we don't have that picture of what we expect for them. That someone's in the next room about to beat you up if something happens to you.
Yeah, that's the thing. Okay, so telltale signs.
Yeah.
Because we ask this all the time, and I like to get people who've actually seen this
Right.
firsthand. What are telltale signs of somebody being possibly sex trafficked,
Right. Well,
if any?
yeah, no, there are. And again, everything is different. So one of the basic general things is just signs of control. If we're talking, and it's different where you are. So if we're talking to law enforcement and traffic enforcement, so those who used to only be looking for drugs but are learning to look for signs that someone's being trafficked. She doesn't have her ID on her. He's, somebody else is holding her ID. I mean, we've got our purse. We can keep our own driver's license. Multiple hotel room keys. And that's for teachers too. If you've got a student whose family is not living in a hotel, who has a lot of hotel room keys in her purse, that can be a sign. Or, changes in behavior. Suddenly somebody's getting their hair done, their nails done, carrying this really fancy purse, but there's been no change in family circumstances to where they should be able to afford that. Somebody with a lot of, cash, or dressed inappropriately for the weather. And that doesn't always mean, dressed like she's going to go try to walk the street and pick up a date. It may just be that when she left her parents' house, it was June and now it's December. And he's not going to buy her a jacket. He doesn't care. He's just got her and gonna keep her.
So it sounds like it straddles so much between prostitution. Like it's
Yeah, well, and they it's kind of there's a lot of that. Yes, because it's both are people, their bodies being sold for sex.
So could that happen? Could a sex trafficker be charged as a trafficker, but the female who may be of age be charged as a prostitute? Can that happen?
It should not legally happen. Because no, and we've put and you used to have, yes, it used to be able to happen, but we've put into our law, no, a trafficking victim should never be charged for prostitution because she's being trafficked, she's being coerced, she's being deceived, she's being forced, whichever it is. And so, well, our kids under 18, we're just straight out banned. No, they can't be charged with prostitution because, again, they can't consent. So you can't be charged with something.
Yeah, we're not
letting you legally consent to. For an adult, no. If somebody's charged with trafficking, you're not complicit in your own exploitation. It's of course something the defense attorneys try to get. I'm sure she was just a bad girl, and this is what she did, and she, like we do victim blaming as a culture.
Yeah,
she shouldn't have been wearing that. She shouldn't have been going there. They should have screamed more. When I was prosecuting, it was right after there's 3 people in Indiana, Illinois, where they'd been kept in the basement for all those years. And even by then, a week or 2 after that, I'd already heard somebody kind of go, well, I mean, why didn't they scream? Why did it take them so long to escape? And because I think it's a defense mechanism, because we don't want to think it could happen to us, then we blame them for their own exploitation. And yeah, some of that good old mentality, well, it's just her fault. She shouldn't have been doing that. And it was one of the things that bumped us closer to our final A grade, was saying, no, you can't charge somebody for their own exploitation. They're a victim. They have to receive services. And we're lucky in Georgia. We've got really some of the gold standard services for victims.
Well, I have a question. I've often heard that we're like the number 1 spot for sex trafficking. Why is that? And it's not like in places like New York City and LA, like where all these. Well, that's why I would expect stuff to happen.
Well, exactly. Well, so that's my favorite question. First of all, we were number 1 on a list of 14 cities that the FBI said were the top for trafficking, and we were number 1 alphabetically. And from that alphabetical list, yes, great. But the other thing is, so trafficking happens everywhere. But some places, starting with Mayor Shirley Franklin down here, and so much changed here in 2006 when Mayor Shirley Franklin said, and Judge Nina Hickson from juvenile court said, there's these girls, they're being arrested for prostitution in juvenile court and no corresponding adult males being prosecuted. And they told Atlanta PD, no, we're going to go after, this is trafficking. We're going to go after those who are buying and selling our children. And we've been super proactive. When we go around the country and speak at conferences, everyone's amazed at how, and people know now actually, how far ahead Georgia is for proactively looking for trafficking victims, recovering them, and prosecuting the bad guys. And we've got some of the best laws in the nation now. And it makes a difference. If you look for it, you find it. There was a time, so we've got 2 major counties that are what we call Metro Atlanta, if you were to think of the 2 major ones. There was a time probably about 3 or 4 years ago when one had a very active district attorney's office and very, very active law enforcement where they were focusing identifying trafficking. And the other one was focusing a little more on not, we don't want people to associate us with trafficking. So no proactive cases. If somebody comes running forward saying I'm a trafficking victim, you can work it. At that time, there were 40 cases in one of these counties and 4 in the other. That is not because there's any more trafficking in the county that had 40 active prosecutions. It's that they were being proactive and looking for it. So when you hear things, like Marietta's done a lot of busts, that's because Cobb PD, Smyrna PD, they have some of the nation's experts in trafficking. So they have a lot of cases. We also have the largest FBI task force, where it's a couple FBI agents that coordinate all of our local departments. And we've got the largest in the country. So we don't have the largest because we have the biggest problem. We have the most cases because we have the most people, and people like you willing to say, hey, this is an issue, we're going to talk about it.
So we're number one more so for a positive way than a negative way.
We really are. For the first list.
It starts with, okay, people, for everybody that missed that, we're at the top of that list because we start with an A.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I mean, I was teaching down a couple years ago in Tampa, and their chief of, we don't have trafficking down here. We don't have it at all. And after their head of crimes against women and children lieutenant had to sit with me for 3 hours teaching a class. You don't even have me that long. Talk. Well, at the end, though, he's like, oh, I can think of 5 cases that have been on my desk in the last few months. I just didn't recognize them as trafficking. Because nobody says, almost no one comes forward and says, I'm a trafficking victim. Because there's so much manipulation. There's so much control. There's so much shame, and they prey on that. So they go after who's going to be vulnerable, and then they just feed into that. So she thinks it's her fault because, she didn't have anything else to do, get anywhere else to go, or she shouldn't have believed him, or she shouldn't have lied to her parents and snuck out, or...
This is really the mindset.
It's the total mindset. So they don't come forward and I'm being trafficked, and certainly nobody's going to call the police and say, hey, I'm prostituting, help me.
Yeah, that...
And so you have to be proactive in looking for it.
So I'm sure the legal definition of sex trafficking has changed over the last 6 years.
Yeah. So, yes. Mostly that has been in clarifying that buyers are traffickers as well as sellers.
Oh.
Because we've always had, when we finally in 2007, we put the first human trafficking law in 2011. We actually made it strong enough to where we could start to prosecute with it.
So what did it say in 2007?
It was...
I'm going to ask because I know you know.
Yes,
so this is your moment because you would know. These are the kind of questions I get to ask somebody, an expert. So what did the law say initially about sex trafficking?
So initially it was anyone who was recruiting for, enticing for, harboring for the purpose of sexual servitude, which is commercial sex with some type of force, fraud, or coercion. And we, in 2011 was when we really clarified that, with kids, you don't have to prove force, fraud, or coercion. They can't consent. And expanded the, and we've always had it where before we changed the law, I charged the first buyer in Georgia and prosecuted him for trafficking. Because we used to have, it was recruits, entices, maintains, obtains for the purpose of sexual servitude. transports. I always forget that. So obtaining for the purpose of sexual servitude was buying. But some places, some judges, especially nationally, it's the same language as the federal. It's like, oh yeah, obtains is probably covers buyers. And it was all upheld, but starting with Congress and then Georgia has been really a leader on going after the demand. Said, okay, you have you're not sure about obtains, we'll add solicits, purchases, just really clear. If you purchase someone for commercial sex, it's trafficking. Another great thing we added in 2011 was lack of knowledge of age is not a defense.
Oh,
so it's a buyer beware state. You purchase someone, you run the risk they're under 18. And we don't even have to prove that they were coerced.
Oh, okay.
We're a big buyer beware state.
Because I'm noticing.
The onus has to be on those who are exploiting the vulnerable, not on the child.
I guess in my head, it all trying to distinguish things.
Yeah.
Because, when the wording of it kind of gets into the sex industry.
Yeah.
You're selling sex when you do porn, and you're going to solicit new porn stars. So it kind of like, it gets really murky in my head when you start getting into that.
And if you were to solicit a child, you'll have all kinds of felonies and trafficking as well as all of the child porn. So, and both ages are under 18. So, you can consent to sex under 16 in Georgia, but you can't consent to commercial sex until under 18. Until you're 18 or older.
Okay, so there's distinguishing for those under 18, because that's really, in essence, who you really want to target to make sure, because they can't consent.
Right.
So you want to make sure that they're covered, because that's the law's job.
When you say commercial sex, what exactly do you mean?
So it doesn't have to be money. Very often it looks like prostitution. It looks like sex in exchange for money, but it can be sex in exchange for a place to stay or food to eat. It's really, the language is sex in exchange for something of value. And it's actually doesn't even have to be sex. It's sexually explicit activities. So it can look like porn. It can look like masturbation. It can look like any type of lewd exhibition. Because I shouldn't give away all our tricks, but, a lot of traffickers are not that bright, and they end up confessing to something. Then they're like, well, we didn't have sex. We just had...
Oh, the famous Bill Clinton line.
Yes.
Just give me fellatio.
Yes.
Oral sex. If you paid attention in class, that's a form of sex.
Yes.
So in essence, these laws are kind of like assault and battery. In the mindset that if you actually purchase sex, it makes you a trafficker.
Right.
If you actually, I can get there.
And it's one of the reasons we focus on demand. It's what fuels trafficking. It's all about supply and demand. And what is being sold, our supply, our commodity, is vulnerable children. And you have to go over both sides. And one of the reasons is, honestly, my seller traffickers, most of them, they expect to spend a certain portion of their life in prison. It's a, cost of doing business. But those who are purchasing tend to be
remorseful and
family men, businessmen. They don't really expect to spend a day of their life in prison. And knowing that they could spend 25, 50 years of their life in prison is a really, really important deterrent.
Well, it's scary because I remember when Katie was here and she shared her story, her dad was the one that was trafficking her, and he was apparently a preacher. Yeah. And she was like, he would distort the word to kind of justify selling her to men. And she told the story about going to houses, and it was just, it was beyond sad about how she told the story.
It is. And one of the...
I don't think you were here. I think it was Terry and...
But no, I'm saying, like, her dad was physically here with her.
No.
God, like, oh my gosh.
No.
Where was
No.
I heard that wrong.
But Katie had been in it since, I think she said she was a kid. She'd been in it. She didn't get out until, like, maybe 5 years ago. I think Street Grace intervened, like, 5 years ago. So she's... Yeah, it was...
She's amazing.
Her dad was the nerve.
She's amazing. We're amazing. We have a survivor advisory board that really leads and informs so much of what we do.
Let's segue. So let's go into Street Grace.
Okay.
What does Street Grace do?
So Street Grace should really focus on prevention, policy, and pursuit. And our goal is to prevent human trafficking. Like I said, victims need and deserve the gold standard of care, and we're lucky to have that in Georgia. But you're not going to solve the problem waiting for somebody to get exploited and offering. You don't undo what's been done. So on the prevention side, we focus a lot on students. We work with schools, we work with churches, we work with youth groups. Just that, educating students, educating parents. One of our newest and most popular classes is the Keeping Kids Safe Online in the Digital Age.
How do you do that?
Right?
I had the kids watching YouTube, and a commercial came up that was not a kids commercial.
Yes.
And I'm just like, now, what if I wasn't standing around y'all and this just pops in?
You still haven't got them kids YouTube.
It doesn't matter. Like
We've been over this.
Look, predators will find a way
I know, but
to
they
get
do.
through.
Well, and gaming systems is one of the big ones now.
Yes.
Anywhere.
You
it's
talk
just-
to somebody all from over the world when you have your headset in. You're
Yes.
playing Call of Duty Warfare. It's like
Which
a 12-year-old
is the
boy.
scary part, because my nephew will stay in the room for 8 hours with that headset and just be going. And we
Yes.
don't go in the room.
Right.
Like, in that space, in those 8 hours, what pops up?
Right. And so it's the kid that really, really wants a new game pack, needs to level up, buy something, whatever it is. Their mom said no, and it's the one who's kind of become their friends. And it's, if you send me this picture, I'll buy that for you. And as soon as it's one, the first one's probably not that bad, but it's bad enough that you don't want to show your mom. It's okay. Well, I'll send this one out to your friends or your team. If you don't, send the next one. So a lot of it is education, conversations, and setting those standards for your kid right from the start. I pay for this, so I can take this away. And just think of it as your front door. You don't let strangers in your front door. You don't talk to people you don't know. When you have interactions with strangers, and they're still strangers, even if they're on Facebook, not because they walked up to you at the street, you talk to your parents about what happened. So much is that communication. And yes, and protections on lines and locks, and making sure your social media doesn't share where you are. If you take selfies, making sure, you don't have your calendar behind you or the name of your school. Predator, when we interview predators after they're caught, they'll have all this personal information about the people that they've been luring and the people they've been grooming, just based on random conversation. They piece it together, and then they've got more control over you. They might not show up at your school, but they can say, hey, I know you go to this school and this is your teacher, and I will send this to her if you don't, do this next step.
Seriously.
Yeah. So there's just so much of that.
So it's psychological.
Yes.
In essence.
Putting little pieces together.
Yeah, it is. It's manipulation. It's, there's there's traffickers that say, I don't care what their need. Everyone has a need. I just don't care what it is. I just have to find out what it is and exploit it. It's usually very
Strategic
deliberate. It's very strategic. The manipulation, when you're on there, I was on one of their Reddit sites once where they were talking about, what's the optimum number of girls in your stable. So that's what, the language for how many girls you're trafficking. Because, you can make more depending on how many girls you have, but then you could have more trouble. So what's your optimum number of control? 3, 5,
Wow.
and they're treated like merchandise. They're talked about like merchandise. If you get them a tattoo with your brand on it, are you upgrading the merchandise or defacing the merchandise? But that is how people are talked about and treated.
Good grief. It's like a whole science to
It
the way
is.
this works.
Yeah.
So let's go back to your very first case. You
Okay.
tried your very first case on this. It's not been like 50 years.
No, it hasn't.
It's not been like 50 years. You're looking like, oh my God, I don't.
Who is the first? Who is the first? I know who the first victim survivor we worked with was.
What was the case you made? Like, what was the case you made against?
Made to trial. I think it was the girl, the first one, who was picked up outside of juvenile court. was brought to Fulton County Juvenile Court. She and she had no criminal issues. She had been, her mom said, talking back to her mom, lying about whether or not she cleaned her room, talking back about, curfew. So her mom had her in one of those like enrichment whatever programs that was down there, preventative, but also letting her ride the MARTA bus back home. And so this guy, what better place to find somebody vulnerable, was cruising by there, stopped. He was an ugly dude. But he had this younger guy, called him his pimp in training, that was closer to her age.
The wingman.
Yes. Cute guy. I mean, I guess so she said. And 3 girls in the back. His girlfriend and 2 other young girls. And like, hop in, get a ride. I have to take my girlfriend. I can take you home. I just have to take my girlfriend and get her hair done. So I'll have to drop you off at my house. And she was totally, this cute little charming guy. So she dropped him off at the house. My main trafficker didn't come back, and he came back with all 3 girls a little after midnight, was handing them all money, refused to take her home, worked on her for about 3 days, not taking her home, trying to get her to go out and sell herself and be trafficked. And, and just like I remember her phrase was, "You're just a dumb HOE." He told me I was a dumb HOE because I'd give it away for free and not make money. It was that kind of constant. He wasn't taking her home. And so finally she went. She was gone about 3 weeks. And she finally she tried to leave. But in that time she saw, he slapped her once. But what she saw a lot more of is some of the other girls he was controlling. Pulled a gun on one of them, beat the stuff out of another one of them, and he showed her pictures of others that, this is why you don't cross me, because this is what I've done. So there's all kinds of different manipulation, plus the, you're going to be able to make a lot of money, and you can help your family, and you can, get all these things you want. Of course that lasts, usually does, the first couple of days, and he's like, no, I'm going to pool all the money so I can get something good for all of us.
Oh, wow.
So, and she was one who she finally earned their trust enough to get a phone, and she starts texting her sister who's with her mom, and she doesn't know where she is, but they're driving to where she's about to be sold. She would be sold to about 15 guys at a time.
Jesus.
And she's texting like street signs, and they stop and call the police, and everybody swoops in and gets her. But it was at a time where it's never happened now, but it was a time where they saw her. They showed she was kidnapped. They saw her. They said, law enforcement goes, oh, she's just a prostitute. She's 15. She's just a prostitute. Wrote a 1-paragraph report, and that was it.
Did they take her, or she was?
No, they didn't charge her. They sent her home with her mom. They didn't arrest him. They didn't arrest the girls that were dropped off. They didn't. So it was at a church that's shaken up kind of near the perimeter. They didn't walk through the bushes. That's where she had been dropped off, where she had walked through the bushes to a house where she'd been sold. She had to do at least 15 guys each time.
Good God.
And they missed all that because they weren't looking for, they weren't recognizing she was a trafficking victim. And she's not immediately saying what's happened, because she thinks she's going to get in trouble. She thinks he's going to go after her family. And so, they missed, thankfully. And the reason this case happened is she's there. She was housed in Atlanta. And one time she walked over that Atlanta border onto Fulton Industrial Boulevard. And a detective there found that 1-paragraph report and worked up the entire case. So this guy's now in their life without parole. But because one officer decided, wait, I'm going to find out what happened. I'm going to be proactive. She recognized this was a trafficking victim because of training she'd had. And we had a guy gone for life without parole because those first people, I mean, it was 1 paragraph. Thought kidnapped victim confirmed was not kidnapped. Probably engaging in prostitution, sent home with mom. And no evidence was collected whatsoever. So it's one of those, it can hide because, again, kids think you're going to get in trouble if you say what's been happening.
Yeah. Like,
and they take advantage of that.
I'm sure between that and feeling like you should have known better.
Yes.
Especially if you were raised a certain way, that you should know better. And so it sounds like there's a procedure now that's been put in place that should happen.
Yes.
What is that? Because it sounds like you went through it.
Well, and that's one of my favorite things has always been training law enforcement, because I've almost never trained law enforcement where either that day or within a week somebody didn't call and say, I think I have got my first trafficking case, once they knew what they were looking for. So yes, between, Street Grace and the Attorney General's office, I used to do a lot of training there. DeKalb County has done a lot of law enforcement training. We're part of the whole state task force that the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council organizes. We've really done a great job at training law enforcement, and it makes a total night and day difference whether traffickers and exploiters and these really evil, manipulative people get arrested, or whether, children get labeled as a bad kid and nobody cares for them.
Jesus. Okay, so because we veered away from Street Grace. Street Grace.
That was prevention. We didn't even get to policy.
I know, right? I'm just like, there's so much backstory on all this,
goodness.
and I ain't even got to that because I have a rule. When you use an acronym, you have to explain what it is. There's so many acronyms that you've thrown around that we can't even get into because, we need to get into. All right, services and programs for Street Grace.
Yes. So there's the programs we do with the schools, the teachers, and the parents on and students, working directly with students and helping them teach their peers. A lot of what we do with students is, facilitating these peer-to-peer led programs, whether it's door decorations, videos on, human trafficking awareness, how to protect yourself, that there are some secrets you don't keep. And that's important because while we say, tell a trusted adult, kids tell kids things. And what you need to do, and recognizing when you're being trafficked, when you're being exploited or about to be, because parents will be shocked by some of the things that kids experience, and kids, you have to tell them that shouldn't be happening to you. That's not your fault, and that is exploitation. So a lot around that area. On policy, that's a lot of our, legislation, getting ready for a new legislative session.
Which ought to be fun.
It always is so much fun. And thankfully in Georgia, we always end right before the Masters. So there's kind of an end date. Most times doesn't have to, but that's, usually their goal. I know April's going to be just fine.
Wow.
Yes. And then pursuit. And so a lot of that is, so we have an artificial intelligence bot. We call her Gracie. She is a highly intelligent and we refer to her as a person, though she is not. One of the highest intelligence of artificial intelligence bot, where she learns with every conversation. And
I've heard of those. I saw a video like that.
She's amazing. I mean, because in my career, I have read hundreds and thousands of text conversations by people trying to buy kids. And she sounds just like them now. So she can intercept when people are online trying to purchase kids for sex. She can she can intercept those conversations.
Really?
Send deterrence messages, send offer of services. All of those conversations, of course, are kept and recorded and available.
Nice.
And just that real, because you have to hit it from all sides.
Yeah.
We cannot do this without law enforcement who can actually make arrests, and they do. Georgia's actually great, especially with the GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, proactively going after buyers and arrests and long sentences, and we've gotten the law all in place. Because also, if you think you're buying a kid, but you're really talking to a law enforcement officer, trafficking just the same. So
To Catch a Predator. Is that
right.
remember that To Catch a Predator
It is.
one?
It is.
Does that still come on? That show was amazing.
I used to watch that.
That show was
yes.
amazing.
Yes.
Like
Well,
the
I've been to it in real life, and it is. And it's amazing who gets caught, because it's not what you think.
exactly. It's never the person you think
it's not
it's going to be.
even always male. It's usually male.
Unfortunately. Yes.
But it's also, it is.
It's unfortunate.
businessmen and youth pastors and family men. And because if you think about it, if you're a single person, you can go to a bar.
Yeah.
But if you aren't supposed to be hooking up with people at bars, you're going to go online and purchase sex, and very often from somebody who's vulnerable, and very often that's a kid.
That's the
So-
ideology of
Yeah, I guess
adults.
that's what
Yeah.
like, what are you gaining from it? I would like to
we
know
know
their
they're
mind.
gaining. We know they're gaining.
Their mindset behind it.
Right.
Like,
Well, and the studies show only about 10% would actually technically medically qualify as a pedophile, like they are looking for a child. But well over 50% just don't care. And then you also look at, and a lot of our prevention efforts, we have to look at pornography too, because pornography is not what it used to look like. It's very violent. The two biggest searches on the internet are rape porn and incest porn.
Seriously?
who's out here looking up? Oh my goodness.
I
So,
don't want to know who.
and kids are exposed to it starting at around 13. 13 is the average age a child is first exposed to it. So if at any point that is what you have become addicted to, and that is what you're looking for and what you want, and not something you're willing to ask somebody you're in a relationship with for, again, that fuels trafficking. That fuels the exploitation. That fuels purchasing. And, our kids are more vulnerable. They can't go get a real job. And if it's somebody who's already running from... So the first victim I ever worked with was one where she ran because her stepfather would have sex with her every night when her mom worked a CNA job at the hospital. So you run. She can't get a job. She can't even get a hotel room by herself. She was
Literally.
14 at the time.
Jeez.
So, and most traffickers have been a little more, I'll protect you first. I'll take care of you. The first person who exploited her was straight up front. You've got one thing of value you can sell. I can help you do it. I'll teach you how to do it.
Wow.
And if that's what her stepfather and her family has already been teaching her, she makes it all the more vulnerable. I think the first case that came to a lot of people's attention here was, because it happens in rural, just like here. It was in Oconee County, that Dodge County circuit, where a child was being sold by her parents monthly to the used car dealer in exchange for payments on the Dodge Caravan minivan.
Seriously.
Because it happens in families too. Yeah. So, of our identity...
A minivan.
1997 Dodge Caravan minivan.
Oh
There's
my
some
gosh.
numbers that just stick with you. Yes. So it happens with families. Just 50% of our victims knew their trafficker well, and it was about 20% that were first exploited by direct family.
Geez, that means it's people in your circle or your parents' circle that are trying to purchase you.
Yes.
Oh, good grief.
And they tend to be the ones who are trafficked at a younger age. If you're first trafficked by a family member versus somebody you meet now online.
But that's not surprising because there's always that running joke. Well, watch out for that uncle and all that type of stuff you always hear. So it's not surprising to me.
like you
It's
said,
people
a
out there.
running joke. The thought of it,
It shouldn't be a running joke, but
Yeah.
it's
Family
always
members.
Yeah.
That's obscene that you can't even trust family members or close friends at
Right.
this point.
Right.
Okay, victim advocacy.
Yes.
Tell me about it. Well, as far as like Street Grace, because I think
Right.
of Katie, so I know some of it.
So a lot of like I said, we have some amazing partners that work on that restorative side of things. And a lot of what we're doing with they're not victims now, they're survivors. And they're leaders. They are responsible for, most of the things on our policy agenda this year were ideas from survivors. So those who have lived experience, who know, because sometimes what we think are the best laws have horrible unintended consequences.
Especially if that has no victims on the board who can actually provide deeper insights.
Yes. Think about what that's going to, think about what that's going to do on the street, or this is what is really needed, like vacation and expungement law. I mean, if you were arrested while you were being trafficked, it's so hard to get out, and there's so much trauma, and then you deal with the trauma, and you deal with all this, and then getting a job, getting childcare, getting housing when you have, any type of record, can be. We've had trafficking victims, survivors who have gone through these amazing internship programs, and last minute gone, oh wait, no, you have a prostitution arrest, you've got to leave. Oh. And it's like, wait, you signed up to help support trafficking victims.
It's like, what did you think they were going to have?
Yes. So, I mean, that's one of the, one of the big things we're looking at here. And then, what happened, they're the ones that know what happened, like, in the illicit massage businesses. And, that's the second largest form of trafficking after escort services, so we think of that prostitution looking escort services, but now after that, it's the illicit massage businesses, where in the country, there's more of those that openly advertise online than there are McDonald's.
Oh, yeah, the ones that's about the happy endings.
Yes.
Jesus. All right. Rehabilitation for a survivor.
Yes.
Is therapy a necessity, or have you seen some who can kind of be put back into general population and survive? Because I guess for me, it would depend on the level of trauma, perhaps, whether they absolutely need it.
I'm such an advocate for particularly trauma-informed therapy, because it's traumatic what they've gone through, even for the shortest amount of time. Yes, whether you need to be in there for 2 years or you need to see somebody once a week for 6 weeks would certainly depend on how long you were there. But I'm not a business-minded person. I've still not worked for business. I've been government most of my life. Now I've gone to nonprofit. But if you just want to think of it that way, I mean, it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to just put a trafficking survivor, back into a place where they can stand on their feet. It's not like you've erased and everything's like good hunky-dory as if nothing had happened. So that amount of money for one person, which they deserve, versus what you can do if you prevent it from happening in the first place. It's strategic. And we are fortunate to have a very business-minded CEO, Bob Rogers, who really helps us understand the importance of evidence-based demand reduction strategies to prevent trafficking from happening in the first place, and how much more really bang for our buck, bang for our efforts can be on working on the prevention side, and whether that's the deterrence and scaring off the bad guys, or arresting the bad guys, or working with the kids, and then the laws to make all that happen the best they can. It's the only way to do it, because again, you don't undo the harm that's been done.
Literally, that's crazy. Okay, so we're down to 5 minutes.
Okay,
told you to breeze by, and we didn't get into half the stuff I really wanted to get into. Tell me about the victory. Y'all had a really big legislative law victory. Tell us about it.
So many things happened this year, and so many things that we've been fighting for 10 years. And a lot of that was because the First Lady attended something we did at the beginning of last year, this whole bus event showing the enormity of the trafficking issue here. And she got on board with trafficking, started this whole Human Trafficking Grace Commission, which I'm honored to be on. So we were able to pass things that I truly didn't quite believe what happened last year, and they did. One was, so children can no longer be arrested for prostitution. And you'd think that should be a given. It should be a given. But the people who had come out for years and go, well, you're just legalizing child prostitution. Like, no, I'm just arresting the bad guys, not the victims. just straightforward. Or, well, that's the only way we have to protect these kids. If the only way we have to protect somebody is to arrest them, then we don't have the right laws and services in place.
That
Can't be the answer.
That's obscene.
So that was huge. Another one was, so some traffickers got really wise. Okay, so they're all looking for the kids. I'm going to get an 18, 19-year-old. I'll get arrested for misdemeanor pandering any day of the week. Misdemeanor pimping, who cares? And they'd be repeat customers, and law enforcement was like, it's a revolving door, and it's a cost of doing business they are happy to pay. And so now, your second time, even buying a willing adult, buying or selling a willing adult is now a felony in Georgia.
Nice.
And this was we've got some amazing representatives, Representative Strachan, Representative Reeves, that have, Renee Unterman, who've worked on this a long time. But it was one of those guys who's like, yeah, because you can hide from your wife where you are for 24 hours, but you can't hide where you are for 72. So now even that first misdemeanor, you buy a willing adult, minimum of 72 hours in jail.
Nice.
So, because those are the same people who are fueling the trafficking that's exploiting our kids. So, and that was when we tried to get through several years, even way back when I was in Sam Mullen's office.
What was the fight?
The last place I've ever heard someone say this was the legislature. Well, why are we going after these buyers? They're just buying sex.
Oh my God.
Sometimes when you're at the Capitol, it's a little like you're
not in touch.
The rest of the world 20 years ago. Yes. They think everybody's lying when they're making reports. It's a different, and not, obviously Georgia has ridiculously amazing leaders, but there's still a one or two that
old club.
Yes. There's just some of that. And so, that fixed some things on the rape shield law, and it's now for the first time required that trafficking victims receive trauma-informed therapeutic services.
Oh, that's good. That's exceptionally good.
And DFACS has been great about doing that, but it was policy, but there's difference between policy and actually putting it in law so it continues with the next director or the next governor. So, so a lot of focus on, victim services. And honestly, it was just kind of amazing. The First Lady showed up on the floor for every vote to make sure everybody knew she really cared about this issue. And so we all sat back and went, wow, it happened. And so, and I'm part of a few smaller national advisory groups for some of our, big national partners, and all of the talk was everything Georgia got passed this year. And it's been kind of cool, kind of actually what you said is number one, we're getting there with our legislation too. It's kind of really exciting.
We're happy to have an A. We have an A, right?
Yes.
We're happy to have an A. We're happy to have, not because it's spelled with an A, but we actually have an A.
We have it. Now we have an actual A, not just alphabetically.
All right, Miss Ebony, anything you want to say before we leave? This is your first day, something like that?
First day on the job.
This is my first day on the job.
This is Ebony's first day on the job, everybody. So we're so happy for her. And she's on radio. And with me. Because I'm special. She's with me. I'm special. So she's here.
Yeah. Way to break me in.
Look, I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
The first day out, you got an email, this morning?
Yes.
I did. And I said, okay. Okay.
Anything you want to say before we leave?
Just thank you for having us, and thank you for talking about something that's so important and bringing awareness to the issue, because it's definitely needed in the community.
Oh, yeah. It's out of hand. It's absolutely out of hand.
Yeah. This is a reason we're number one.
People
are you're willing to talk about it.
Yeah.
Well, we try to do what we do.
Yes.
All right, so how will people get in touch with you guys?
So really our website's best, streetgrace.org. All of our emails are our name at streetgrace.org. And it's really, not only do we have our events, lobby days coming up, I do a policy training class that while we focus on trafficking law and where it's been and where it's going, it applies to anything. How to take an idea and make it a law. And all of those you can sign up for there. And then our resources. We have all kinds of resource cards on how to talk to kids, how to protect yourself online, how to talk to your friends, what trafficking, red flag signs. I mean, we talked about some of them, but, if you click on our resources tab, all kinds of great PDFs and information, more than we can share.
All right. All right, people. There you have it. Our amazing guests being here with us on today. Once again, I have to make this promise. I'm going to have them come back because I didn't even get into half the stuff I really want to get into because there's so much back history on sex trafficking legislation, just how it's gone about and how it's changed. So I'm going to have to ask, y'all coming back?
Yes, absolutely.
There you go. So they agreed to come back. So we're going to get that scheduled. And we will see you guys next week. Same time, same place on the Leadership Blend with your host, Ricardo D. Rice.
You're listening to the Leadership Blend podcast.
I'm ready.
On the Thinking Out Loud Network. Check out the Thinking Out Loud Network at thinkingoutloudnetwork.com.